A Democratic congressman from Michigan has introduced articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump. I'm Andrew Rafferty in Washington, and this is on the scene. Representative Shuri Tanadar says Trump, quote, repeatedly demonstrated that he is unfit to serve as president and represents a clear and present danger to our nation's constitution. Tanadar cites unlawful deportations, Trump's tariff policies, and DOJ's dismantling of federal agencies among his evidence. But with Democrats in the minority in the House of Representatives, this effort won't go far. Trump was impeached twice in his first term, but never removed from office.
Okay, let's talk about what has gone down in the last 48 hours. And honestly, this is absolutely unbelievable. House Democrats have just filed brand new articles of impeachment against President Trump, not old ones being recycled, like brand new ones. We are talking about articles that were filed literally yesterday and today, October 11th and 12th. But here is the part that really makes your jaw drop. At the exact same moment this is happening in Congress, his own cabinet members are reportedly meeting behind closed doors to discuss using the 25th Amendment to remove him from office. That's right. You heard that correctly. Trump is simultaneously facing a removal effort from Congress and a removal effort from the people sitting inside his own administration, both at the same time. This has never happened before in the entire history of the United States. Never. Not once. We have seen impeachment attempts before. We have heard 25th Amendment talk before. But both happening at the exact same time, running in parallel, that is something no one has ever seen. So what is actually going on here? Why is this all exploding right now? And why are people who work directly for Trump, people he chose and trusted, reportedly turning against him? Let's start with the impeachment articles. These are not recycled charges being pulled from 2019 or 2021. This has nothing to do with Ukraine. This has nothing to do with January 6th. These are completely new accusations filed within the last 2 days, and the language being used is as serious as it gets. The official charges include what is being described as a treasonous war against the United States. That is the actual wording being used, treason. They are accusing a sitting president of waging war against his own country. And it does not stop there. The second major charge is systemic violations of constitutional rights. Not a single isolated incident, a pattern. A repeated, deliberate abuse of power, serious enough, they argue, to justify removing him from office immediately. Now, here is where things get really important to understand. What actually triggered this? What did Trump do in the last few days that pushed Democrats to say enough is enough and file brand new impeachment articles right now? Two specific things happened that set this entire process in motion, and both of them are raising serious constitutional red flags among legal experts. Number one, on October 9th, Trump signed an executive order officially labeling a group called Antifa as a terrorist organization. Now, whatever your personal opinion is on that decision, here is the legal problem with it. Experts are saying the president simply does not have the authority to make that designation on his own. There is an established legal process for officially labeling groups as terrorist organizations, and that process involves Congress and has to meet specific legal standards. Trump skipped all of that. He just signed an order and declared it done. Number two, and this is the one that really lit the fuse. Trump reportedly fired a federal prosecutor. The reason? That prosecutor refused to open investigations targeting Trump's political opponents. Let me say that one more time so it fully registers. A federal prosecutor was allegedly fired because he would not go after the president's political enemies. That is not a gray area. Legal organizations are calling that an unconstitutional abuse of power. And we are not talking about fringe voices or political activists here. We are talking about groups like Free Speech for People, a nonpartisan legal advocacy organization that has been tracking presidential accountability for years. They actually published an updated list, and the number on that list is staggering: 25 separate grounds for impeachment. 25. And the last two items on that list were added within the past 48 hours. directly based on these most recent actions. So that is the impeachment side of this. Already extraordinary, right? But hold on, because there is more. Because at the very same time House Democrats are filing these articles, multiple cabinet members are reportedly holding private conversations about invoking the 25th Amendment. And if you are not familiar with what that means, let me break it down quickly. The 25th Amendment is a provision written into the Constitution that allows the Vice President and a majority of the cabinet to formally declare that the President is no longer capable of carrying out the duties of his office. It was created for situations where the President is physically or mentally unable to function. Think a stroke, a coma, or a complete loss of the ability to lead. It was never designed to be used as a political tool. But that is exactly what is being discussed right now. According to reports coming out between October 10th and 12th, high level officials, we are talking legal advisors, national security officials, people who sit inside Trump's own inner circle, are actively considering this option. The reason they are giving is that Trump is demonstrating an inability to carry out his duties as president. Now, what does that actually mean in plain terms? Nobody is saying Trump is physically ill. Nobody is saying he has had a medical emergency. What they are saying is that his behavior has become so erratic, so far outside the boundaries of what normal presidential conduct looks like, that he is effectively no longer able to do the job the way it needs to be done. Can you take a step back and think about how extraordinary that is? This is the kind of scenario you would expect to find in a political thriller novel, not in real life. And yet here we are. And the public is clearly paying attention. Websites like impeach.org saw enormous spikes in traffic over the last 24 hours alone. People are watching. The pressure on both Congress and cabinet members to actually take action is building by the day. So what happens next? That is exactly what we are going to dig into, because what is unfolding right now goes far beyond one president or one administration. We are dealing with fundamental questions about constitutional authority, about the balance of power between the branches of government, and about whether the system of checks and balances the founders built can actually hold up and function in today's intensely divided political climate. What happens over the next few weeks could genuinely reshape how presidential power works in this country for generations to come. All right, now that you understand what is happening, let's talk about why it is happening and why it is happening right now, because the timing here is not a coincidence. Let's go back to the impeachment articles. Here is something most people are not fully aware of. This is not the first time Democrats have moved to impeach Trump during this term. We all remember the two impeachments from his first term Ukraine in 2019, January 6th in 2021. But even after he returned to office in January 2025, the efforts never fully stopped. Activist groups, legal organizations, and certain members of Congress have been quietly building cases, gathering evidence, and documenting what they consider impeachable conduct. But here's the reality: Democratic leadership has been reluctant to pull the trigger on another impeachment push. And the reason is straightforward. They remember exactly what happened the last two times. Trump was impeached twice, and both times the Senate acquitted him. So there has been a very real fear that if they go down that road again and fail again, it hands Trump a political win. It feeds directly into his narrative that he is the victim of a witch hunt, and history has shown that narrative actually helps him with his base. So Democratic leaders have been holding back, waiting for something big enough, clear enough, and serious enough that it might actually peel away some Republican support, and apparently they believe these latest actions have crossed that line. Take the executive order designating Antifa as a terrorist organization. On the surface, a lot of Trump's supporters are probably nodding their heads and thinking, yeah, finally, it's about time. But here is the legal problem that cannot be ignored. The president does not have the unilateral authority to declare a group a terrorist organization on his own. There is a formal legal framework for that. It involves the State Department. It involves Congress. There are established standards and procedures that have to be followed. You cannot simply wake up one morning, decide you do not like a particular group, and label them terrorists with the stroke of a pen. And those procedures exist for a very important reason to prevent exactly this kind of abuse. Because once a group is officially designated as a terrorist organization, the government gains the power to do serious things to anyone connected to that group, freeze their financial assets, conduct surveillance on them without the normal legal requirements, arrest them under an entirely different set of legal standards. This is not a minor technical issue. This is serious. So when a president bypasses that entire process and does it unilaterally, when Trump bypasses all of that and simply declares it through an executive order, yeah, constitutional lawyers are alarmed. They are saying this is a president reaching for power he does not legally have in a way that could very easily be turned around and used to go after political opponents. And then there is the prosecutor situation. Reports on this are still coming in, and Trump's team is denying that it happened the way it is being described. But according to multiple sources, here is what allegedly took place. A federal prosecutor, someone whose entire job is to enforce the law without bias or political influence, was reportedly told to open criminal investigations against specific individuals, people who happen to be Trump's political enemies. And when that prosecutor said no, that there was no actual evidence to justify opening those investigations, they were fired. Now, if that is true, and I want to be clear, I am saying if, because this is still being investigated, but if that is true, that is a textbook case of obstruction of justice and abuse of power. That is literally using the Justice Department as a personal weapon to go after people you consider your enemies. That is what authoritarian leaders do. That is not how democracy is supposed to work. And legal organizations are pointing directly at this and saying, look, this is not a matter of political opinion. This is not about whether you personally like Trump or not. This is about clear, fundamental violations of the constitutional limits placed on presidential power. Free speech for people. The organization I mentioned earlier has been tracking Trump's actions from the very first day of his second term, and they have put together a list of 25 separate grounds for impeachment. Some of those items are things we have heard discussed before: questions around classified documents, alleged financial conflicts of interest. But the two newest additions to that list, numbers 24 and 25, were added literally within the last 48 hours, based specifically on the Antifa executive order and the firing of the federal prosecutor. And here is what sets this impeachment push apart from the ones that came before it. This time, the support behind it is broader and more institutional. This is not just progressive Democrats beating the drum. You have mainstream legal organizations, former federal prosecutors, and even some conservative legal scholars coming forward and saying, yes, this has gone too far. This crosses the line. Now let's talk about the 25th Amendment angle, because this is where things get genuinely complicated. The 25th Amendment was ratified in 1967, and it was created to solve a very specific problem. What happens when a president becomes unable to perform the duties of the office? Before this amendment existed, there was no clear official procedure to follow if a president suffered a heart attack or a stroke. There was no established way to temporarily or permanently transfer presidential power. So the 25th Amendment created that process. Section 4 of the amendment states that if the vice president and a majority of the cabinet conclude that the president is no longer capable of carrying out the powers and duties of his office, they can make that declaration, and the vice president immediately steps in as acting president. Now, this provision has never actually been used to remove a president against his will. Never, not once in American history. It has been used a couple of times when presidents voluntarily handed over power temporarily during medical procedures, like when Ronald Reagan underwent surgery, but forcibly removing a sitting president using the 25th Amendment, that has never happened until potentially now. Reports coming from inside the administration indicate that multiple cabinet members are actively discussing this option. And the question they are wrestling with is a profound one. Does the phrase "unable to discharge his duties" only apply to physical or mental incapacity? Or can it also cover a president who is acting so recklessly, so far outside the boundaries of the Constitution, that he is functionally no longer capable of doing the job in the way it is supposed to be done. This is completely uncharted legal territory, and it is splitting legal experts down the middle. Some argue the 25th Amendment was strictly designed for medical situations and should only be used that way. Others argue that a president who is systematically violating the Constitution is, by definition, failing to faithfully discharge his duties, and that qualifies. And here is the political calculation that cabinet members are being forced to make right now. If they invoke the 25th Amendment, they are ending their own careers. That is not an exaggeration, that is a guarantee. Trump's base will see them as traitors, plain and simple. They will become completely toxic in Republican politics from that moment forward. So, for any of these people to even be having this conversation, to even be considering this option, things must be genuinely, seriously bad from where they are sitting. Who exactly are these cabinet members? We do not have confirmed names yet, but reports indicate it is a combination of legal advisors and national security officials, the people who are specifically supposed to serve as the guardrails that keep things from going off the rails. And apparently, some of those very people are now concluding that the guardrails alone are no longer enough, that something more drastic needs to happen. Now, let's talk about the timing. Why is all of this coming to a head right now in October 2025? We are less than a year away from the 2026 midterm elections. Democrats understand that if they are ever going to make a move like this, it has to be now, while they still have enough institutional power to act. If they wait and Republicans pick up more seats in 2026, impeachment becomes mathematically impossible. And there is something else driving the urgency, a growing sense that Trump's actions are not staying the same, they are getting worse. The Antifa designation, the firing of the federal prosecutor, these are not random, isolated incidents. There is a pattern forming, and people inside the government are apparently alarmed about what that pattern leads to next. This is the kind of moment that political scientists are going to be studying and writing about for decades. We are watching constitutional theory collide with political reality in real time, and nobody, not legal scholars, not politicians, not anyone knows exactly how this ends. All right, let's bring this down to earth and talk about what all of this actually means in practical terms. What happens next, and why does this matter to you? Let's start with the basic question: does this impeachment actually have a realistic chance of succeeding? For Trump to be removed from office through the impeachment process, two separate things have to happen. First, the House of Representatives has to vote to impeach him. That only requires a simple majority. Democrats control the House right now, so yes, if they are determined to push this through, they can probably get that vote done. But then comes the hard part. The Senate has to vote to convict, and that requires a two-thirds majority. Two-thirds. That means you need 67 senators voting yes. Right now, Democrats are nowhere near that number. Even if every single Democratic senator votes to convict, which is not even guaranteed, you would still need somewhere around 18 to 19 Republican senators to cross the aisle and join them. Is that going to happen? Honestly, probably not. Trump still has a very tight hold on the Republican Party. Most Republican senators know that voting to convict Trump would almost certainly destroy their political careers. They would face primary challenges, lose their base, and be done. So the realistic expectation is that impeachment passes the House, stalls, and fails in the Senate, and Trump stays in office just like the last time and the time before that. But, and this part is important, that does not make this whole effort pointless. Because impeachment is not only about removing someone from office, it is also about the historical record. It is about making a formal public statement that gets written into the history books permanently. Every president who has ever been impeached carries that as a permanent mark against their legacy. If this goes through, Trump would become the only president in American history to be impeached 3 times. That means something. On top of that, the impeachment process itself would take over the news cycle for weeks, possibly months. It would force Republican senators to stand up publicly and defend Trump's actions on camera, on the record. It would drag everything out into the open. And that kind of sustained public attention can shift public opinion, which can influence the midterm elections, which can directly affect Trump's ability to govern for the rest of his term. So, even without a conviction, the ripple effects of this are real, far reaching, and very difficult to predict. How the rest of Trump's presidency plays out and how history ultimately judges this moment could be shaped significantly by what happens in the coming weeks. Now, let's get to the 25th Amendment, because this is where the situation becomes truly extraordinary and the political math looks completely different. If cabinet members actually move to invoke the 25th Amendment, Trump is removed from power immediately, not after a Senate trial, not after weeks of debate, immediately. The vice president becomes acting president on the spot. Trump can challenge that decision, but here is the critical part. While he is in the middle of challenging it, he is still out of power. And to get back in, he would have to win a vote in Congress. That is actually a higher bar to clear than surviving an impeachment because it requires majorities in both the House and the Senate simultaneously. So, in theory, the 25th Amendment is actually a faster and more decisive way to remove a president from office. But here is the catch: it requires the vice president to be fully on board with the decision. And right now, we simply do not know if that is the case. If the vice president is not willing to go along with it, the entire effort collapses before it even starts. There is also a much bigger issue lurking underneath all of this. Using the 25th Amendment for political reasons, rather than for a genuine case of physical or mental incapacity, would set an incredibly dangerous precedent for the future. Think about what that would actually mean if a group of cabinet members can remove a sitting president simply because they disagree with his decisions or do not like where he is taking the country. That is no longer democracy. That is a coup. Even if you personally believe Trump's behavior fully justifies it, you have to stop and think about what door you are opening. Could future administrations weaponize this same tool? Could every president going forward face the threat of removal from their own cabinet the moment things get politically uncomfortable? These are serious constitutional questions, and there are no easy answers to any of them. So, what is actually going to happen? Let me give you my honest read based on how these situations have historically played out. The impeachment articles will move forward in the House. There will be hearings, there will be testimony, there will be wall to wall media coverage. It will be an absolute circus, and eventually the House will vote to impeach. Trump will become the first and only president in American history to be impeached 3 times. Then it moves to the Senate, where it will almost certainly fail. Republicans will stand up and argue that this is nothing more than Democrats trying to reverse an election result they never accepted. Democrats will argue this is about constitutional accountability and the rule of law. And the American public will be divided along exactly the same lines they have been divided along for years. Nothing new there. Meanwhile, the 25th Amendment conversation will most likely fade out quietly. The political price is simply too high. The legal ground is too unstable. And when it comes down to it, cabinet members will probably decide that this is not worth destroying their careers over. But here is the thing, and this matters. The fact that we are even having these conversations tells you something important. It tells you that a significant number of people inside this government, including people who work directly for Trump and have been loyal to him, believe that things have genuinely gone off the rails. That alone is worth paying attention to. And here is why you should care, even if you are completely exhausted by politics, even if you are tired of hearing Trump's name every single day. What is happening right now is a real, live test of American democracy. Can the system of checks and balances actually function the way it was designed to? Can Congress hold a president accountable when he crosses the line? Can cabinet members serve as a genuine check on presidential behavior when it becomes necessary? Or has the presidency grown so powerful and political tribalism run so deep that real accountability is no longer possible? These are not abstract theoretical questions debated in university classrooms. The answers are going to directly shape how every future president behaves. If Trump can do everything he has done and face no meaningful consequences, Future presidents will absolutely take note. They will know they can push even further. They will know the limits do not really apply. But if there are real consequences, if impeachment actually carries weight, if cabinet members are willing to put their careers on the line and stand up, if voters demand accountability loudly enough, then maybe the system still works. We are about to find out. This story is developing literally by the hour. More cabinet members could come forward. New evidence could surface. Republicans could begin to break ranks, or the whole thing could fall apart, and Trump walks away from this stronger than ever. One thing is absolutely certain: the next few weeks are going to be unlike anything we have seen before. Stay tuned because whatever happens next, it is going to be historic.